Hello and welcome to another episode of the Stock Market Today video. It's Justin Nielsen here, and it is Monday, January 13th, 2025. To help me break down the action in the indexes today, we've got Ed Carson joining us. He, of course, is the news editor here at Investors Business Daily. How you doing, Ed?
I'm doing all right. Yeah, the market looks a little better than when we were first discussing things a few hours ago, but I do want to take a look at three stocks beyond just the market: Planet Fitness, VIX, and or Wix, and Baker Hughes.
Yeah. Well, we could take a look at the VIX too. I mean,
Good.
there
That
has been some extra volatility, so maybe we'll take a look at that. But before we do that, let's go ahead and we'll get into the market real quick. I'm going to share my screen. Here's the Nasdaq Composite right now, and I'm going to just walk through the indexes. Looks like the Nasdaq Composite was down about 0.38%. S&P 500 up actually at the end of the day to finish with a 0.2% gain. The Dow Jones Industrial was actually up for most of the day. It was up almost a full percent, and the Russell 2000 was up about 0.1%. But a lot of damage there already done, but support at the 200-day moving average line. How about we go back to the NASDAQ and let's get your thoughts here, because this has definitely been the leading index, Ed, and a nice kind of reversal at the end of the day.
It was nice. If that continues, then that's positive. This is be really nice. It's also the fourth down day. Like if you look at it, so if we fall again tomorrow, then today's comeback won't mean much of anything. So it's hard to know what there's still a lot of work on the upside. It has to get above the 50-day line, it has to get above the 21-day line, and then maybe the highs from like a week or so ago, and then you basically got the all-time highs. But there's a lot of levels, and it hasn't done any of those things. It's always nice when you stop the bleeding, or at least slow the bleeding, and it was nice to see some gains elsewhere, but there's not a lot of support on the downside for the S&P and the NASDAQ, maybe for some of the weaker indexes, but that's also because they've been so weak. So again, definitely nice to see the positive bounce, but I'm not really feeling much more bullish on it. I'm just feeling, I guess, maybe a little less bearish than I was 3 or 4
Right.
hours ago, is really what it comes down to.
Yeah, just because it's not falling apart doesn't really instill a lot of confidence necessarily to go out and do a lot of buying. And as you mentioned, look, the NASDAQ Composite on Friday, of course, it was its first close below the 50-day moving average line since September. For the S&P 500, we noted that on Friday, we have that 21-day moving average line now trending below the 50-day moving average line. So that kind of ends the power trend there. Again, nice that this was able to get to a positive close today, after kind of shaking out a little bit. But look, we could get a rally of a couple days and then see things get ugly. And I mean, that's pretty typical, right? When you start turning that trend, go back to tops and you see the trend turn, and then you'll have a rally of a couple days. Sometimes it's a little weak, and then things really get ugly. So I think you have to kind of, it's too soon to declare victory, right?
Absolutely. And it's like it would take a lot. Again, there's nothing really on the downside with these indexes. You could easily see them falling to the 200-day line, there's some levels. There's always a level where you could find support, but it's just a lot of things on the upside. A couple of days to the 50-day line. Then it could be, there's these other things that it's going uphill for a while. And there's definitely places you have to go through. So we'll see. It was nice to see that turnaround.
Mm-hmm. And since we're looking at the S&P 500, it's probably worth looking at RSP, which is the equal weighted version of the S&P 500. Like the Russell 2000, here we are right at the 200-day moving average line. I mean, you could look at this and say, oh, well, is this a buying opportunity at the 200-day line? I don't know. The relative strength would maybe make me hesitate a little bit on that.
Yeah, and it's going up. There's the 21-day line there. There's all those short-term levels. There's so on the upside, there's so many places where you could stop. And I'm not saying that, I mean, if you got the NASDAQ back above the 50-day line and maybe the S&P getting there, then maybe you'd start thinking, okay, I'm going to take things. But you have to be extremely nimble, because it's just the odds are low. The rewards are less and the risks are higher. That's not a situation you really want to be in. And again, if we get above the 50-day line, then you can try, oh, maybe I'll do a little dip in the water, see, because you never know when something, if that's the kind of trader you are. But it just feels like we need a lot of repair work, and it's definitely much more prove it to me. This market is disappointed. This market keeps on falling.
Mm-hmm.
Prove it to me this time, rather than just assume, just take for granted that everything's fine.
And then over on the Dow Jones Industrial Average, again, if you look at the day here, I mean, it quickly got into positive territory and pretty much stayed there. So while it's a strong day, almost up 1%, it's still uh, it's still kind of it didn't do the undercut as viciously as the other indexes, but it also still has a ways to go before it even gets to the 21 day, the 50-day line.
Yeah, and we'll see. I mean, like energy's doing pretty well. Financials had a good day. We'll have a lot of banks this later this week. But yeah, it's just the weaker parts of the market improved, and so that was nice.
Mm.
And but just a lot to go. I mean, again, even if this was a great day, you'd have to
Right.
take it with a grain of salt because, again, not this is a correction. It's certainly not a bear market, but the best days in market history are always are in the worst times usually. So even if this were truly, a great day, you'd still want to have a little bit of grain of salt
Yeah.
on the market.
To that point, I mean, looking at the Russell 2000, this is the small cap index. I mean, this already is kind of in correction
Yes.
territory. I mean, it made it down 10% off of its peak. Looking at the weekly chart, we can see that this was not nearly in the uptrend that the Nasdaq was. The S&P 500 relative strength. This has been in a downtrend versus the S&P 500. So while it's kind of edged up and gotten support at its 40-week moving average line, this just really it's had a lot of these kind of false starts that just don't seem to go anywhere. So does this need more time?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, are you going to put your faith in the Russell? And it's just like, well, that's more of a swing trade, like because it could really fly. It seems like Russell has not taken the lead for quite a while, not at least not for more than a week or so at a time.
Right. Sometimes only a couple days.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, in that regard, do you want to take a look at the 10-year Treasury yield? Because certainly this is an area where, I mean, if you want to look for strength, the yield here has been really on a tear. Once it got above the 200-day moving average line, had another test there at the 250-day line, and it just seems like it hasn't really looked back. I mean, a little bit of a pause to start the year, but here we are. I mean, remember this is where we were at its peak, back in May, and we were kind of bemoaning, the getting back up to 5% for the yield. What do you see here?
Yeah, I mean, some of this is positive because the yield curve is normalized. The 10-year is now higher than the 2-year and higher than the Fed funds rate, which actually wasn't happening for a long time. So some of this is good. But obviously, there's concerns about the Fed, maybe Trump uncertainty. We'll see. Maybe those fears are unfounded. Okay, it doesn't mean it, but like the market is reacting this way right now, and that's clearly a headwind for the market. The market had this really strong move for quite a while, and at first it shook off the yields coming back in September, October, and there was this and that, and of course, then the market really rallied off of Trump, and yields actually came down for a while. After Trump in that mid-November, there was various reasons for that, but at this point, that is definitely a huge factor for why the market is struggling. If that continues to go up, it's hard to see the market making a ton of headway. It doesn't mean that this or that stock can't do well, but that's just really not that's the real problem for the market.
Yeah, and certainly a key day here is December 18th,
Yes.
on the 10-year Treasury yield, where that was Fed Day, and the reaction, as we've noted a number of times, was decisively negative on the indexes. So good for the yields, but terrible for the indexes.
Yeah.
Mhm. Let's go ahead and take a look at some stocks, shall we? We'll start with Planet Fitness. I don't know if you mentioned this, but stock of the day today, getting back above 100, a little bit of an outside day, it looks like, but closing well.
Closing well. It found support at the 10-week line. It was actually undercut the 10-week line, I think, today, and it's almost to the 50-day line. So support around there. It's been trading around the 21-day line, very tight. There's, I think, a 5 weeks tight in there.
Mhm.
And at the end of this week, it could be a flat base because the middle of that tight area, but you could basically treat this as a flat base. It's been trading flat for 8 weeks or something. I don't know. It's so uh, the relative strength line is at a new high. Today, they had some fairly positive comments to say about gym membership. Memberships rose, and that's even with the first fee hike that they had in like 25 years. So just a positive in that regard. So if it gets above some of these levels, I think, maybe last week's high, or maybe, some of these highs, there's definitely places where you could try to enter it. Again, I had some good news. It's been doing well. The relative strength line is going up, but it's not going anywhere. The stock itself is not going anywhere. I think that's something that just in general, some stocks are going up, but a lot of stocks that are showing relative strength are more like, hey, let's put this on my watch list rather than say, I really want to get excited and I want to be buying this.
Mm-hmm. And I guess on the good note, just because it's not going anywhere, that means it's not going down either.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you definitely, yeah, it's flexing, but it's just like, it's like if I've got a 5 pound weight, it's like, I'm straining, but it's like, at least it's not falling on top of me.
Right. There you go. And Wix, this is something that we added to Swing Trader today. Another one that just seems like it's been really digesting the gains from its last earnings report. Really flat action. This flat base is only 10% in depth. Just really kind of let that 10-week moving average line catch up to it. And here we are on the daily chart. Now, something that we were talking about today was GoDaddy being, such a nice trending stock for most of 2024. How do you think Wix shapes up?
Yeah, I mean, Wix now has the better profit outlook for 2025. I think GoDaddy had the better 2024, but so maybe it's Wix's turn to go. But you're right, all those actions, tight action. It's been holding that 21-day line. It's got a flat base. It backed off a little bit near the close, but on it, look, going up, that's a nice gain when a lot of techs were not having a good day, and it really never went down. The relative strength line is at a new high. So, I mean, it's a blue dot, I think, on the weekly. I'm not sure why it wasn't on a daily. Well, it should have. Yeah, okay, there it is. So, again, a lot of nice action. The fundamentals are strong. The group is strong. This stock is strong. So, a lot to like about that. That gets back up to today's highs. I think that would definitely be actionable. Again, in the context of this market, again, this is something for swing trader. It would be a little bit more, it's different for, to take a new position as a position trade.
Right.
I think you definitely want to be thinking more, you have to be really nimble and at least be willing to exit very quickly if things aren't working right.
Yeah. And it's interesting that, I mean, if you look at XLK, that's been taking a pretty big hit. IGV, for the software has been, week after week down. So to see something like Wix hold so tightly, as you said, the relative strength is certainly there. Probably the reason it doesn't have the blue dot on the daily is because it's not recognizing a base here.
Oh, that's right. Of course, you're right. Of course, that's right.
It's got that flat base on the weekly, but it's just not recognizing a base here. Doesn't mean it's not doesn't exist. It just means that the algorithm doesn't recognize it.
You're absolutely right.
No problem there. That's what humans are for, right? The AI hasn't taken over yet. Let's go ahead and end the show with a look at look, there was a lot of stocks in the energy sector that throughout the whole day they looked so different. They looked so different. They weren't coming down. As you mentioned, there was strength in the Dow Jones Industrial Average, and to a lesser degree, the S&P 500, partially propped up with some of these oil and gas names, energy stocks. And Baker Hughes, BKR is the ticker symbol here. One of those big ones that had this break above the 50-day moving average line, relative strength skyrocketing higher, another blue dot, and really, really strong price action today. What do you think?
Yeah, and there were a few names that did well a few months ago when Baker Hughes went out, but most of them fell back in. Now, some of them are coming up, but a lot of them, in the oil space. But this one held up. This one held above the top of that base. Really strong action. Look, energy stocks especially the oil and gas names. They basically, the market has an impact, but they really do go beat to how oil prices are. The USO, that's been going up. It was another strong day. Like it was big gains in oil prices. Now there's new restrictions on Russian oil. That could mean not only higher prices, but maybe we'll get more drilling in the U.S. You can just see the scenarios there. UNG, which isn't so much for Baker Hughes, but still relevant to a lot of those gas names, that's trended up from really deep lows. I mean, it's gone, again, not the greatest thing, but you go from 12 to 18. That's a pretty big increase. So we're seeing a lot of natural gas names as well. So that's what's driving that. So that can be sometimes when the market's not doing well, energy is an area that can fight the trend because it really just goes to a different space. Baker Hughes looking good here. Again, it'll be interesting to see if prices are high, if supply outside of the U.S. is high, and then you figure Trump the incoming Trump presidency, he will encourage more drilling, but they need the prices to be high enough for them to want to do
Right.
that. So if you have a situation where he's doing policies to encourage drilling and the prices encourage drilling, then you can really see service companies like Baker Hughes have a really strong performance. And so that's why Baker Hughes is coming right up there. What is it above the 50-day line? It's probably getting up there. That'd be one concern because it did go through the 50-day line like a week or plus or so ago. And
So
that
about
was looking, you can still do
6.6%.
it here. Still do it here. Again, you just never know with oil prices. It's going to be driving with oil prices. So you just have to recognize that fact is that the chart may look great. Everything's looking great. And then if oil prices, for whatever reason, fall 6% over the next week, Baker Hughes is going to take a hit. There's nothing you can do about that. Also,
Mm-hmm.
earnings are coming up, which are definitely relevant for the services firms, because, really get an idea of what they're doing.
Mm-hmm. And then, a lot of times we talk about, I mean, this has had some strong earnings growth here
Yeah.
for a while. I mean, 50% EPS growth on an annual basis. Now, granted, earning stability is not, it's quite wild in that regard, but that's not, I mean, that's not unusual for an oil and gas stock. But usually we think of these as being cyclical, and the by the time it rolls around to being profitable as Baker Hughes is, usually it's done. So can you kind of tell where we are in the cycle, or is it just there's too many moving parts here to really
There are
kind of make
so
a
many moving
yeah.
parts. I mean, because you just don't know how OPEC or how Russia sanctions. What if there's peace, however, on whatever terms with Russia and Ukraine, and then the expectation is that there'll be an unleashing of Russian gas? Or what if Iran is bombed? Like all sorts of things. You can do scenarios that have
Mhm.
nothing to do with supply and demand
Right.
beyond the fact that there's all sorts of supply and demand questions. So that's always so tough. And it makes it tough for me to be buying energy stocks because there's always these things going on. But
Hmm.
doing well, it's nice. It's a nice shallow base. If you miss some of these other bases that were a little bit messier, this is a nice, really, and that wasn't too bad at all. But this was a little deeper, a little bit messier. This one, 13% deep.
Yeah.
So there are some limits. You can buy it, and you know that things aren't working right.
Hmm.
Fairly easy without taking too much of a hit.
Yeah, and it's certainly going in the right direction. 25% depth, 17% depth, and now 13%. So it is getting tighter, and we do like to see that, that stability kind of hit the price action. So very good. Well, hey, Ed, really appreciate your help in breaking down the action. Of course, we will be back. You'll be back on the show tomorrow to do it again with another day and see what happens tomorrow when we have the stock market today video. So please join us for that. We've also got a podcast coming up with a new guest on Wednesday that I'll be hosting with David Cox. We've got a webinar with Swing Trader on Thursday after the close, so that'll be interesting, and also our regular Swing Trader status update. Not to mention IBD Live every morning. So that's a place where you can also see Ed give his context and a lot of news. See how quickly Ed can do news in the morning before the opening bell, because that's a sight to behold. So thanks a lot for your comments, Ed.